I'm a traitor, I'm a vile creature, a lot of it is misogynistic.
I've had death threats, I've had threats of violence to some of my people here.
Look, there have been moments in which I've had anxiety attacks because of the level of threats.
Being called everything from a lying dog to cheat, traitor or death threats. These are some of the 330,000 abusive tweets that prospective MPs have been enduring in the run-up to the election.
But we wanted to really drill down to how much of this abuse was happening, who it was directed to, the nature of the abuse itself and how it was all connected. So we teamed up with the think tank Demos to produce exclusive new numbers for the scale and nature of online abuse in the run-up to this general election.
This is Josh. He's trained an algorithm to sift through millions of tweets to identify those that are abusive and aimed at candidates who were previously MPs before Parliament dissolved. But the algorithm first needs to be trained by humans before it can sift through the millions of tweets. So Josh is teaching Soiler, a researcher on Click, to help with this monumental task. Crucial to this is how it decides what's abusive versus what's just fair criticism. That's where personal judgment inevitably comes in.
What this gives us the opportunity to do is to say, right now, in British democracy, that's an insult.
The algorithm is about 70% accurate and only includes candidates running for re-election. But after just a few weeks, it revealed some startling results. Around 334,000 tweets, that's around 7% of the total, received by candidates were insulting. That's 10 for every minute of the campaign, minute in, minute out. And a lot of the abuse the MPs received depended on their background, their gender, and their stance on Brexit.
What's causing this insulting behaviour to arise? Well, some research suggests it's down to organised groups or disgruntled individuals, people who feel isolated from the mainstream, but now, thanks to social media, can enter the public conversation more easily than ever before.
Hate is a tactic used by various types of organisations and individuals. They are unified by a desire for someone to respond to them. And we have, as a society, as individuals, we have been responding, we've been engaging with this kind of hate for far too long. And so for the first time in this general election, we've seen mainstream political actors using trolling techniques in order to amplify their message on social media.
So the three primary ones, the three main ones, were honesty, intelligence, and this accusation of treachery.
When I joined Josh, I was surprised to learn that the main party leaders weren't the biggest targets of abuse, at least as a proportion of all of their mentions.
Boris Johnson's right down at the bottom of this.
Jeremy Corbyn isn't even in there at all. This isn't a one-party issue, is it?
Right, this is much deeper than just single attacks on single. One candidate who received an awful lot of this was Ian Duncan Smith. As you can see right down at the bottom, he also got sworn at a lot. And if you are white, you are more likely to be sworn at and called a traitor than any other ethnicity that we looked at.
But of course there are human beings on the other side of the screen. So I visited the constituency of Ian Duncan Smith, who told me his way of dealing with all of this is simply never to engage.
The problem is sometimes with elections and things, they actually feed this a bit more because they tell everybody, actually, we all hate each other. We don't. I don't hate Labour. I've got lots of Labour friends. The problem with the internet is it takes that bit of the anger and then accelerates it in because it makes it immediate, instantaneous, and it gratifies rather like a drug.
But abuse, of course, isn't just something that happens online. And a day after I visited his office, it was vandalised. Back at the Research Hub, they generated a huge map of abuse.
So this is our universe of abuse.
It connects the candidates being abused to the people doing the abusing. The bigger the clusters around a candidate, the greater the number of people that are sending them the abuse.
You can kind of see that the most prominent politicians, especially Boris Johnson and Jeremy Corbyn, but others too, almost have their own personal entourages of people that specifically tend to abuse just them.
Here the Brexiters are in pink and the Remainers are in green, both groups angrily surrounding the two main party leaders. On this map, the abusers accusing the candidates of dishonesty are shown as red dots, while on this, those accusing them of treachery are grey.
Really, the people that are getting called traitors are from the third parties and up into Labour.
One of the most surprising findings was that men overall tended to receive more abusive messages than women on Twitter, although of course this doesn't mean that what they did receive was worse or more threatening.
Obviously, these are broad trends, and the experience of every candidate is going to change. Take, for example, Angela Smith. So she is being insulted a lot for her honesty and being called a traitor 4 times more than the average candidate. Now, this could be because she's recently changed parties. So she's now with the Liberal Democrats. She also voted against Brexit.
This was against the majority in her former constituency, and she says she's faced a torrent of abuse, from anti-Semitism to misogyny.
In order to stay sane, I do not look at most of the abuse that's directed at me on Twitter. I just don't think any individual can cope with that. You can feel the anger behind those tweets and the anger behind the use of capital letters, the aggression. And I find that really frightening.
So it seems that whether it's leaving your party or taking a stance on that ultimate of all divisive issues, Brexit, can make you a lot of enemies online too.
Next, I wanted to see whether the type of abuse candidates received also tended to differ based on their ethnicity.
What we saw here is that if you are a BME candidate, you are more likely to be accused of being stupid, basically, to be insulted for your intelligence. A good example of this is David Lammy, who is insulted for his honesty and his intelligence. He's also sworn at an awful lot.
Earlier in the campaign, David Lammy tweeted about a report he'd overseen, the Lammy Review, into the disproportionate number of black and ethnic minorities in the prison system. And even he, no stranger to online abuse, was taken aback by the response.
I was staggered at the level of abuse that I received. That's an indication of just how toxic things have become. Most of the abusive tweets directed at me are really pushing deeply racist, stereotypical tropes. They're tropes about being stupid. They're tropes about being lazy. They're tropes that involve the N-word.
So what does the research actually tell us? Well, there's the scale, of course, 10 online insults of every minute of every day of the campaign. These insults cut across the political divide, but they're also determined by what a candidate says and who they are.
And for sure, it's not just happening on Twitter, and it's not just happening to politicians. So I think one of the big questions we now have is, as politics with each passing day becomes more digital, how can we make it less angry?